Vimanas.
Vimanas. Vimanas. Vimanas.
Bumbule Baba. Chanaga Baba Nagaraja. Yeah. I've perfected the 6 yogas of Naropa. 7 cobras, I send my head over my shoulders. You can smell the odor of the God's aroma. The loner in the oneness, substance motor. Not accustomed to the bogus, I function with culture. Dragons in the dungeon, let's run, come forward. Show up with one love and that's our mission and motive. Devoted to my God self, I felt the voltage. We help you know the subtle energy auras. I'm greening, I'm golden, I'm redding like odors. The soul is omnipresent and omnipotent. The power is now, this very moment. Emotions equaling, energy in motion. Keep going, keep the stream flowing. Ra's heat forces have been reloaded. The 12-strand DNA band recoded.
Peace. We tend to think of existence as having form. And we give names to these shapes or these forms to try to understand life. And we believe these labels as being actually what they are. So when we label something a tree, it is actually a tree. When we label something a human, it is actually a human. Water, it is actually water. A cloud, it is actually a cloud. And when this happens, and we live in these beliefs, we're missing something essential to what we experience. I often speak of the source as formless. And if the source is formless, ultimately its quote-unquote creation must be formless as well. But we operate in the world of form. And when we label these things, we think we know these things. But we are clueless to what they actually are. And these labels that we give to things like tree, car, food, etc., these labels are practical for everyday life we experience. But to understand them in truth, these labels and understandings help us very little. So if we look at our experience of life, whether you're here right now, whatever you're looking at, or whatever you've experienced, if we look at our experience, we would all agree that everything changes. And similar to the example of a cloud, if we're laying in a field and we're watching a cloud pass, a cloud at one instance could be formed into a tree. And then a few seconds later, it will form into a pig, then into a person, then into the shape of a car, right? This cloud is taking all these forms and we'll give it labels: tree, pig, person, car. So using this example of the cloud changing forms, right? We know that the cloud is not those apparent forms. We know that the cloud is not actually a tree. We know that the cloud is not actually a pig. We know that the cloud is not actually a person. A cloud is a happening or an event that has no actual form, but appears as form. But in our experience of life, we think that existence has form. But as the example of the cloud, these forms continuously change. In our experience, forms continuously, but at a slower rate, change. They rise up, fall, and decay. Yet the average person, we think these things have actual form. Yet the average person will tell you that they experience everything as changing. So just like the cloud that changes form, but actually, in essence, has no form, existence is appearing to have form, but these are just passing images as well, or as vapors, just at a slower rate. existence is ultimately formless. So these seeming forms that we see in our experience are sort of a mirage. Our bodies, our minds, are expressions of a formless event or a formless happening. Just as the cloud is formless, yet appears as many forms and in time changes to different forms, so too is the same with our experience of life. And the reason this happens is because ultimately, at its source, it is formless. So these appearing forms that we call forms are actually formless as well. They just appear as forms at certain times. Just like the cloud is ultimately formless, yet a cloud has no true form. So the fingerprint of the source, of the formless source, is even on the visible world. Its fingerprint is imprinted in it if we had eyes to see. So the physical forms that we experience in life ultimately are no form at all because they're constantly changing. There is nothing stable there to say that's what it is. In order to find what it is, you must find the formless within you because you are nothing but an appearance of the cloud as well, in that example, of the formless cloud. You are an appearance of the formless source of our forms. Even if we sat in meditation, if you have ever meditated, you will realize that certain forms come about, feelings of itching on the leg, or sounds, noises being made, smells appearing and going, all these things. If you just sat and meditated for 5 minutes, you would see that all these things all these forms, whether they're thoughts, feelings, smells, sensations, are constantly rising and falling. But in order to do that, there must be a background in which they rise and fall in. All of these things are pointing you to the source that you are, if you only had the eyes to see and the ears to hear. So using this example of the cloud and the forms that it creates, like the car, like the tree, like the pig, like the person, the very isness or amness or bigness of all these forms is the cloud. In the same way as the very isness or amness of all the forms of life is God. In the example of the cloud is the very self of the pig, of the car, of the person, of the tree. There is nothing but cloud in that because the cloud is omnipresent within it. So there is no actual thing called a tree or a person or a car. It is only cloud that appears in these forms. In the same way, the very self of all things in existence, the very self of all selves is God. And this is how close God is in experience. But that's even a lie because there is no us or individual self for God to be close to. Just like in the example of the cloud, there is no car for the cloud to be close to. All there is cloud in the shape of a car or in the shape of a pig or in the shape of a person. There is no person separate from cloud. It is just cloud. Yet we don't realize because we take things to be real and we don't see the essence or the substance or the reality to existence. We don't see the formless that all forms are made of. From the cloud's point of view, there is no pig, there is no person, there is no tree. There is only cloud in its beingness. Similarly, in existence. From God's point of view, there is no you. And as I have said, the self in you is God's self. The I in you is God's I. There is only God. And when you figure out what the I is the portal to the knowledge of what you are. The formless appearing as the form, just as in the example of the cloud. The very self, the very I-ness of those forms is nothing but cloud. In fact, there is no form independent of cloud. There is only cloud. Peace.